here with you guys live for the Thriving Marriage podcast. If you can see and hear me okay, let me know in the comments. So today we are talking all about unconventional tips to save your marriage and to rekindle intimacy. We're going to go beyond just basic kind of communication tips that are out there. Before we get to that though, I'm going to share our client win of the week. This one comes anonymously, but I did High Thrive coaching. They said, I read and did the love dare. My husband even agreed to complete the book course, His Needs, Her Needs. I remembered that even if one person is done in the marriage, he was, that I wasn't not at fault for getting us to this point. I worked on all the things I could to make our marriage better because the goal was not to go back to how it was before. The goal was to be better and stronger than before. I also gave myself a timeline to continue to work on it, even though he was completely distant. I would say I haven't done enough yet. It was a very long road to recovery for us, but we made it. And we are still working on it 2 years after he told me he was done and was seeing someone else. It is possible to save your marriage. It is definitely hard work, but all good things in life are hard work. So leave a comment, say congratulations to this client who worked so diligently to turn her marriage around, how he went from not wanting to work on the marriage, saying he was done, to be willing to work on things with her and to save their relationship. So it's amazing. Awesome, right? So now I want to know, let me know in the chat, in the comments here, what is the best communication advice for marriage that you've ever heard? What are some really conventional advice or tips that people give when your spouse is pulling away or when your relationship is on the rocks? Okay. I would love to know what you guys have heard and what advice you've been told to try to turn your marriage around. I'm reading the comments here. Never go to bed angry. That ruins not one day, but two. Live next door and don't communicate unless you have to. No small talk. Keep God first. You would rather be right or be at peace. The choice is always yours. Use non-violent communication when giving feedback. It's a great process. Only wish I would have known about it 25 years ago. Don't believe her when she says he's just a friend about her coworker. It's just what will end your 15-year marriage. All right. So we have quite a different spectrum here of responses on things that you've heard to try to get your spouse back and communication advice that you guys have been given. So I appreciate you guys sharing that. And I would love to hear more. So as you guys are watching live or the replay, leave a comment and let me know what kind of advice you have heard to try to turn your marriage around. Okay. I will be watching the chat and the comments as we are live here today. All right. So let me go back over here. I'm watching two different screens. Okay. So we titled this podcast today and we're using the term some unconventional tips, right? So I'm going to keep watching the chat and I want to see what kinds of advice have you heard out there. So out in the wild, right? Some of the conventional tips that I've heard are some of the ones you guys mentioned. Never go to bed angry. Communication is key. Don't sweat the small stuff. Put the relationship first above all else. And it takes two to tango, right? So we're here to tell you that if these bits of conventional advice are not always the best ideal, especially if we take them out of context. So some of these advice that we're getting from our friends, from family members, from pastors, therapists, even if they're very well-meaning, can actually completely backfire in our circumstance or just be very ineffective and give you poor results. One of the very common ones that I often hear is to work on yourself. Yeah, raise your hand, put that in the comments if you've been told to just work on yourself, become a better person, become a better version of you. And all of those things, while they're great for you and it's good to progress, they in and of themselves are not the solution to save their marriage. So if that's what you're relying on to try to get your spouse to come back, become willing to work on the marriage, it's going to be ineffective because A, either spouse doesn't notice the changes that you're making, or B, they just don't care. Maybe they're just, beyond the point. They're so apathetic now, they just don't care that you've made all those changes. Or C, They might think that they're just a manipulation to get them back. And they don't see the real you, and they don't believe the changes that they're seeing. Does this sound familiar? Is this resonating with anyone? All right, cool. So what we want to do is kind of break through some of these these conventional tips and show you some unconventional ways to turn your marriage around, to stop a divorce, to save your marriage, and to even rekindle romance. So the first one I'm going to talk about is it takes two to tango. We've talked about this a lot on the podcast. In fact, I think it was one of the very first episodes we ever did way back in the day. If you've been told it takes two to tango, you're not alone. Oftentimes, we're told that it takes two to tango because you think, oh, well, a marriage is 50-50. If the other person isn't willing, then there's nothing that you can do. You have to have both people wanting to work on the relationship in order for it to be saved. And while there is some truth to that, it does take two people to have a relationship. It can't just be one person giving all the time. However, what do you do when your spouse isn't willing to work on it with you? They don't want to go to therapy. They don't want to work on the relationship. They don't want to talk about the relationship. Where does that leave the person that is still wanting to have the relationship, that is wanting things to be healthier, wanting them to turn around? Well, that's where our big discovery and breakthrough came, is that we discovered that one person can save their marriage on their own without their spouse's initial commitment. And we've proven that because we've helped over 15,000 couples now to do exactly that. The reality is that you have a huge influence in your relationship. And more often than not, when I'm talking to you guys, and I understand what this feels like, when your spouse is pulling away from you, when they're withdrawing, when they're giving you the silent treatment, it's terrifying. And it can feel like they have all the power here. It can feel like your spouse is calling all the shots. They're the one that's in control. They're the one that's doing this. They're the one that's having the affair. They're the ones that's pulling away, right? And so you can feel like no matter what you do, it doesn't make a difference. And no matter how hard you try, it doesn't seem to matter. And that can give more ammunition or evidence to the story that it does take two to tango. So I understand where this is coming from. But what you need to realize is that if you're doing that, you're giving all the control and the power to your spouse. Where does that leave you? If you're wanting to turn your relationship around, then I invite you to do what our clients and our students have done, which is to step into their empowerment and to realize that they have a huge influence over the relationship. Even if it feels like your spouse is calling all the shots and has all the cards right now, you do too. And so we will show you how to stop doing the things that are ineffective, that are exhausting and backfiring and making you feel like nothing you do is working, because they aren't, and show you instead what actually works to get your spouse back, to have them want to work on the relationship with you, to become willing to dance the tango with you. So you have that equal partnership. And like our client here mentioned, with our client Win, it does take consistency. It does take time to turn that around, but it is absolutely possible. All right, I see some awesome comments coming in. I see some questions coming in too. And so I'm going to go to some of those as well. I've been told to keep taking care of my family and praying for everything. If I don't, it reflects badly on me, but I don't get credit for still being responsible and loving my family. Judge won't tell my wife to try counseling or stop divorce process. Yeah, and so taking care of your family and praying for everything. Again, we talked about this a little bit at the end of the last podcast, right? Prayer is good, but I believe that God expects us to take action in the way that he guides us so that we can find solutions to the problems that we have. And so, yes, have faith, yes, have prayer, but take action on what you receive from him so that you can have that positive outcome that you're wanting, rather than being like the person that's on the boat that's like, God save me. And he sends another raft and they're like, well, come on, we're here to save you. And he's like, no, I'm waiting for God to save me, right? And then a helicopter comes and he's like, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. And you don't realize that God actually put those things in your path to help you along the way. Another way that I like to put this is when you make a decision about where you want to go and what kind of relationship you want to have, then the way to get there always makes itself manifest. You just simply have to be willing to step onto that path. Okay. All right. Awesome. Let's go on into another one here. let's go into put the relationship first above all else. Now, that might seem like good advice, right, for a relationship. We may have seen this, in fact, I've even said this on the podcast, like you do need to prioritize the relationship. You need to make sure that you are nurturing it and taking care of it. However, we're going to go and be the devil's advocate here and all of these for a minute and flip it to give you guys some unconventional advice, right? So instead of prioritizing the relationship above all else, because that can actually get to an extreme and unhealthy level. You guys see where I'm coming from? How many of us are feeling so desperate, so fearful about our spouse pulling away that it's all we can think about? We fixate on it. And maybe we go into those mistakes we talk about, demanding our spouse works on things, begging them, pleading, manipulation, trying to just get them back, right? And you can't think at work, you can't focus, you can't be present with your kids, you can't even sleep at night. It's just kind of consuming everything in your life. That is so common. In fact, I've heard it hundreds and hundreds of times from our clients and students. And so, yes, do prioritize the relationship, but not at the expense of your own mental and emotional health. So what you want to do is create space for your own mental and emotional health. Okay, I'm going to put this in the chat here. Create space for your own mental and emotional health. What do you guys think that could look like? Do you feel, oh, sorry, I misread, Robert. No worries. All right. You said paying and not praying. Gotcha. I'm reading fast and I'm doing this live, so appreciate your patience. But you create space for your own mental and emotional health. Do you feel like you have space to take care of yourself, to make sure that your mental, physical, emotional needs are taken care of? And being an emotional safe harbor, right? What does it mean to be an emotional safe harbor? I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear your experience with this. If any of you feel like, yeah, I used to just obsess about the relationship, and now I feel like I have so much more peace because I am taking care of my own emotional needs here. So an emotional safe harbor, what does that mean? It means being able to absorb emotions, right? Creating safe spaces to share feelings, even the unpleasant ones. And it ultimately goes back to Carl Rogers and his 3 conditions for healing. First is empathy, which is having understanding for others. Authenticity, being able to be open with your own feelings and being really integritous about what they are, very authentic and genuine with what you are really feeling instead of trying to hide it, cover up, or make another story about it, right? And third, unconditional positive regard, which is viewing the things that are shared in the best possible light. This is really going to shift things for you. So often, like I mentioned, I've heard it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times that clients and our students are just obsessed about the relationship. They feel like it's just consuming everything in their life. They can't focus, they can't think straight. And so when you take a step back from that, as we teach you how to do in our path process, one of the things we help our clients do is hit the pause button with their spouse by taking the pressure off. So this pressure that you're putting on the relationship right now, you're putting it above everything else, even your own emotional, physical, spiritual, intellectual health, right? Is not going to help you get your spouse back, because it's still from this place of fear and desperation and that pressure to try to get things turned around, try to get them back, try to get them talking to you, try to get your spouse to do something different than what they're doing so that you can feel better, never works. It does not work. And so just recognize that you may have been doing that and it's not working. What we help our clients do is shift out of that high pressure state, that fearful, desperate state, to process through those emotions, create a safe space to share their feelings, even the unpleasant ones, but usually not with your spouse right now, usually not, right? That's going to backfire. But in the coaching with us, absolutely a safe space to share, right? And then go on into taking the pressure off, building in some empathy, some of that authenticity and unconditional positive regard, so that you're not looking through that lens of fear and pain anymore, but you are stepping into your creatorship as a human being to create the reality that you really want to see, to create the relationship you really want to have. And that is when you step into your personal power, and when you can feel calm and centered, and like it's going to be okay no matter what happens. And not only do you feel better when you do this, right? You feel better emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, in all the ways. But the interesting thing is, it actually makes you more attractive to your spouse. So before, when you were doing all those desperate things, putting so much emphasis on the relationship, prioritizing it above everything else in your entire life and your entire existence, right? That was only creating more stress and more fear. And it was repelling the very thing that you wanted, which was your spouse to come back. Now we've learned how to process through our emotions, how to take the pressure off, how to be okay no matter what happens. And the fascinating thing is, now you are actually in a space to be attractive to your spouse and to receive the thing that you're wanting. Most people don't do this. Most people stay in that biological instinct to keep in these fearful responses, these fearful behaviors, and these fearful reactions that are all driven by desperation, fear, panic, overwhelm, stress, pain, hurt, bitterness. It goes on and on. But when we're operating from that place, you will continue to get more of that same result. And so this is what we help you do, is shift to learn how to not overcome, but to feel those emotions, to overcome those instincts, and to step into your higher self, into your higher reasoning part of yourself. And you will not only feel better, but it will be more attractive to your spouse as well. Now, I have some powerful mindset practices that teach you exactly how to do that. In fact, I'm opening up some one-on-one mindset sessions, which I haven't done for years because I've been busy raising little children, but I've done this with thousands of clients now. And so if you want one of those one-on-one sessions to learn how to shift out of that fear and into your personal power, then just leave a comment, say mindset, and I'll send you the link to that. We also want to go into taking care of yourself, making sure that you're taking time and focus away from the worrying about the relationship, making sure that you're talking to others, talking to a therapist, talking to a coach, talking to a professional, right? Getting support from a community. And really ask yourself, what really helps you to fill your bucket? What helps you to feel peace, to feel joy, to feel presence, to feel fulfillment, to feel satisfaction? What really lights you up or helps center you and calm you? What are the practices that you've found that help you to get there? Because we all know, and let me know in the comments, because I want to see what you guys are doing. You never know how what you found might help and inspire someone else. So let me know what helps you to fill your bucket, right? And leave a comment and let's discuss it. Because you can be running on empty, right? If you keep looking to your spouse to make things better, to make you feel better, you're really putting all of the power and control on something that you have no control over. And so what helps you to feel centered and to feel strong and at peace, even in the midst of these challenges? Because challenges come to all of us. That is the one sure thing of life. And the challenges come for a reason. And this might be one of the worst, most hellish challenges of your life, but it has come to you for a reason. I believe challenges come to teach us something, to help us to grow and to learn, and not just go through the challenge, but to actually overcome the challenge. When you overcome challenges, you become a stronger person yourself. You become wiser. You learn from the experiences, and it helps you to become a better person. Okay. So I love some comments here. I love to work on reading God's words and praying continually. Love that. Thank you for sharing. I like to meditate, time with my kids, time with animals, all of those things. So make sure that you are creating space to take care of yourself. You will not only feel better, but again, you will actually be more attractive. Attractive in a way that isn't desperately just trying to get your spouse back. Attractive without an agenda. Okay. That is the key. So I hope that can really just sink in here, that you can be so attractive and have no agenda about trying to get your spouse back. And that's like often when the magic happens, when they naturally want to come back to you. When you flip that magnet around, so you're no longer repelling each other, but you're just synced up. We call this drawing your spouse back to you like a magnet. All right, let's go on to one of these other unconventional tips and truths here, okay? So we often hear that all you really need to have is communication. Communication is key. In fact, I'll raise my hand and say, I get this, and I know where this is coming from when my marriage is suffering, and it has suffered many times over the past 18 years, right? Communication is always the first thing that goes out the window. And what we're often talking about with communication is actually being understood. What we're really wanting is understanding. We don't want to just say more words. We want those words to mean something. We want our spouse to understand where we're coming from, and we want to understand where they are coming from. Okay. So communication is great, right? It's even better when your partner feels like there is some confidence with solutions. Understanding is happening, and you guys are confident there is a solution to these problems, right? So what problems should you focus on? Marc has termed this the impossible problem. This is when your spouse is pulling away, when they're saying, I want a divorce, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. This is the thing that your partner claims will never change. You will never change. I can't be happy here. I can't trust you. We've tried in the past and it's never worked. What is your spouse's impossible problem? Leave a comment. Let me know. What are the things that they're claiming are never going to change? And because they're never going to change, it justifies them in continuing with divorce or continuing with separation or continuing with the affair or continuing with whatever they're doing that's pulling away from you. Okay. So let me know what your spouse's impossible problem is, and I will send you some free guides and resources on how to help them overcome that. So it means, right, that not only do you want to get some help, you want to talk to people, you want to break old patterns and do things differently. Okay. You want to demonstrate that things can and are different. We often do this through what Marc calls home messages. We're going to take that impossible problem that your spouse has, and we're going to show them with a lot of empathy and a lot of understanding and a lot of consistent action that things are different. And as you break those patterns that you're in right now, because we're all in different patterns, right? Can you agree to that? You're in a pattern with your spouse. I'm in a pattern with my spouse. There's a certain way that you greet each other when you see each other. There's a certain way you handle talking about topics or not talking about topics. There's a certain way that you react when you feel defensive. There's a certain way that they respond when they're feeling defensive. There's a certain way that you say goodnight or you don't say goodnight. There's a certain way that you initiate physical affection and sexual experiences, and there's a way that you don't do that, right? So we're all in these different patterns. And what we help you do is identify what those patterns are that you are in with your spouse, to break them and to create new functional patterns. And as you do this, you not only demonstrate that things can be different, that they are different, you're going to get your spouse's attention. Remember at the beginning, I said either they A, don't notice the changes, or B, they don't care, or C, they think it's just a manipulation. This is going to solve all of those, because A, they're going to notice, B, they're going to care, and C, they're going to see that it's not just a manipulation, that these things are true. With home messages, like I mentioned, and we've talked about this before, right? Our clients know how powerful this is. It's you're stating a positive affirmation kind of about the relationship. But what you're doing is you're changing that old narrative that they have about you, that impossible problem, the thing that you'll never change. And you're creating a new story for them and helping them through action to see that this new story is a possibility, or it can be a possibility, and that they can be happy with you, and they can see the possibility of things working out, and they can feel safe talking to you, that you are respectful to them now, that they are getting their emotional needs met, that you are a safe place, that you are trustworthy. Go on to whatever problem it is, and that you are actually now the solution to that problem instead of the obstacle and the barrier. Okay, that's exceptionally powerful there. Yeah, awesome. I see so many comments coming in. I'm going to definitely make sure if I don't address them live, that I'll go back and answer every comment and question that we get. All right, now let's go on into root issues as we're talking about solving the problem here. Instead of focusing just on communication, let's go a little bit deeper and focus on solving this impossible problem as well as root issues. So the issue that kept the two of you stuck, not solving problems previously, is the root issue. Now, the root issue is different from the impossible problem. The impossible problem is like the words that they're saying of like what will never change and why they want out and their story. The root issues are trickier. They're beneath the surface. The story or the impossible problem is the symptom, and the root issues are the cause of that symptom. The impossible problem is what we see on the surface, the affair, them wanting a divorce, why they're not happy, why they say it won't change, right? But the root issues are the deeper things going on inside of them and inside of the relationship that have caused them to create this story about you and the relationship. And oftentimes we can't see them from where we are. We're so close to it, we just can't see it for what it is. And so that's why it really takes working with a professional, an expert that knows how to diagnose what's really going on and prescribe the treatment plan to get there. Okay, I often say this, but I'm going to say it again. You cannot read the label when you're inside the bottle. We are all inside the bottle of our own marriage. And that is why it's so important to have that expert to read the label on your bottle, to diagnose what's really going on and prescribe the treatment plan specific to you and your relationship to see success. And if you want us to help read the label on your bottle in a free marriage breakthrough session, then just type in the comments right now, read the label, and we will get you that session where we'll read the label on your bottle. So just comment, read the label, and we'll get you the link to book that completely free marriage analysis where we do that with you. Because it's important to know what the root issues are. If you just treat the symptoms, what happens to a patient? You guys are smart. What happens to a patient if you just treat the symptoms? Right. You might fix it for a while, but if you're just putting a Band-Aid on a cancer tumor, is that really the solution? Even if you did surgery and cut it out, but you didn't understand where it came from and why it happened, then more symptoms are going to show up somewhere else at some point. So just ending the affair is not enough. We need to know why the affair happened. What are the root issues that came on through this, right? So we need to identify what those are, because this is why problems were not previously solved. This is why it led to this point. And this is what we need to heal at the right time in the process so that you can create a new, healthy, functional relationship between you. Okay. And part of this is going to be increasing communication, right? Does it mean that, right? And we have to laugh here because despite the title, communication has to happen, right? Does it mean resolving past pains? Does it mean setting boundaries, having greater accountability? It's going to mean all of those, right? Generally, resolving root issues is actually an uncomfortable process. It's a little bit like when I had to have surgery on my tumor. It was not a comfortable process. There is a reason why this never got solved previously, and why it started causing other issues down the line, okay? So it's really important, though, that we do this in order to experience full healing. If you are committed to full healing, declare it now, say full healing in the comments, and know that it is possible to get there. Doesn't mean it's going to be comfortable, but it does mean it's going to be worth it. Exactly what our client said in the client win that I shared at the beginning. All right. Now let's go on to another of these conventional truths, right? Which is don't sweat the small stuff, right? So we're actually going to challenge that one and say, be proactive instead of not sweating the small stuff. Now, if your partner is considering divorce, then you almost want to quote unquote sweat some of the small stuff. I'll explain why with a caveat. Okay. One of the most common reasons for relationship breakdown is because little issues never got resolved. They kept getting swept under the rug, and you just chose to not sweat the small stuff for so long that eventually the small stuff became the big stuff. Anyone else relate to that? If so, leave a comment and let me know. All right. And so what we want to do instead is look at what are some of those things that piled up over the years. Okay. Those issues that never got resolved over the years led to this relationship breakdown, right? And as a result, everything started to pile up until it became overwhelming. You made a mountain out of a molehill, right? It does, it happens. So take initiative to start taking care of all those little things that never got the attention that they needed. I know I have a tendency to do this with my husband. Both of us, we really don't like contention. We really want things to be comfortable between us. And so oftentimes something he says will kind of like tweak me a little bit, but I'll just let it go. And then another thing will kind of tweak me a little bit, and then I'll try to let it go. But I'm not really letting it go. It starts to build up and build up and build up until boom, right? It just kind of all explodes. So what we want to do is, again, let's look at what some of those issues are and start demonstrating that new narrative, that new story, and being proactive about some of those little issues is going to go a long way into preventing them from becoming big ones. So all of this proactive behavior should be centered on some themes. These themes, when acted on and communicated consistently, start to help your partner question the need to get a divorce. So what we're talking about here are some of these smaller bids. Who here has heard me talk about smaller bids before? If you're familiar with High Thrive and our podcast, you may have heard this before. Oftentimes, when your spouse is pulling away, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is pushing for your spouse's full commitment and this connection with them, pushing to resolve some of those deep issues too soon. And so what you want to do instead is actually make some smaller bids for connection and commitment. And you can often take here, this is like a pro ninja tip that I'm giving you, is take some of these smaller issues, some of these smaller complaints, and start to solve some of them. So if your partner's saying, I don't feel like you respect me, I don't get any respect, right? Well, respect is something that you can demonstrate in even small, simple ways. When they say, don't text me, and you keep texting them, is that demonstrating respect? No. So that is where we help you, again, to break up some of the patterns that you might be in and to demonstrate this new story, this new theme, right? And when you do it consistently with action, it starts to help your partner question, again, that need to pull away from you, the need to get a divorce. They realize, oh, he is respecting me now. I feel respected. Okay. It's going to get their attention and help them to consider the possibility of staying with you and stopping the divorce. Okay. So remember, resolving small concerns that come up actually demonstrates high amounts of consideration. Think back to a time when maybe you brought up a small concern and it was addressed with a lot of consideration, and it made you feel like they were really listening to you, understanding you, and respecting you, right? It goes a long way that they're listening, they're understanding, and they're respecting. Here's the caveat, okay? But of course, being nitpicky, tedious, or sweating all the small stuff is about finding faults in all the little things. And that's definitely not where we want to go either. So yes, at this stage, we want to be concerned about some of the smaller issues that we can approach and address with our spouse right now. But we definitely don't want to do this as a vehicle to deliver complaints or to see the relationship with even more negativity. Remember, when we go back up here to what we talked about earlier, is that we want to make sure we have a positive regard, even unconditional positive regard, where we start viewing the things that are shared by our spouse, even by us, and in the relationship in the best possible light, rather than through the lens of your own negative, painful, fear-based story about the relationship. Shift out of that. Choose to create the new reality, the new relationship that you want to see. Okay? All right. So we want to be proactive. All right. Now, I've heard this one a lot. I'm not sure if you guys have heard this one a lot. It was one of the first bits of marriage advice that I think I ever got. It was probably in my teens, well before I was even like thinking about getting married. I heard this one, right? Never go to bed angry. Who here's heard that one? Okay. And I'll admit, when I first heard it, I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Why would I want to go to bed angry with my spouse? I definitely want to make sure that we aren't sweeping things under the rug and that we're like happy and that we don't let anger and resentment build up in our relationship, right? Then I got married and I got angry. And there were things that made Ben angry and things that made me angry. And oftentimes we would just try to keep hashing it out long into the night. Often, I think subconsciously from this, this conventional idea that you shouldn't go to bed angry. And I get the comment that I saw in the group earlier that if you go to bed angry, then you not only ruined one day, but now you've ruined two. I get that. However, what I learned and what we've also helped our clients with is actually know when to call it quits and know to not call it quits, sorry, when to call a pause button and a redress, right? Know when to give some space. So learn to recognize when things are becoming overwhelming for either of you, okay? Many people have difficulty staying present with consistently high drama or intensity. And many of these same people may need time to retreat and think about things for a bit, or perhaps to just cool off and calm down. This is okay if your partner is feeling overwhelmed and you need to give them some space. In fact, this can be a positive thing if you are demonstrating some care and compassion for your partner who needs a little space and you are the one providing them that. This doesn't mean that you just abandon problems or complaints, right? That would be sweeping things under the rug, which is, again, not what we want to do either. So what does this mean? What do you guys think it means? Let me know again in the comments. I'd love to hear your ideas. What does giving space in an appropriate and healthy manner look like? What we found is giving space is more meant to allow people to calm down and think about the situation. It is best to provide some expectations around when you would like to revisit and resolve some concerns, okay? This is actually something that has been transformative in my own relationship. I tend to be the one that pushes for resolution, pushes to talk about things, and my husband tends to be the one that withdraws, sometimes put up the walls. He sometimes gives me the silent treatment. He just shuts down emotionally. And when something happens, I'm like, let's go, let's talk about it. Let's get over this and get on with our lives. And my husband is one of those people that needs some time. For him, it could probably be days, maybe even weeks before he's ready to talk about things. For me, weeks doesn't work, but I can accommodate a day or two. So how we handle things now compared to what we used to do, which didn't work, where I pushed and pushed and pushed and he just eventually shut down, right? Is I say, okay, when in the next 24 to 48 hours can we talk about this? And then he'll agree to a time and we'll both put it down and give each other some space. He'll have time to think and process the way that he likes to do and is good for his temperament type or whatever you want to call it, his personality, right? And it helps me to have peace knowing that there is a time when we will come back to talk about it. And this helps us to work through conflicts and tension or issues between us in a way that works good for both of us and it feels good. And it's been transformative for my relationship. And I know so many people have said the same thing. So this is really important that you don't just hold on trying to like fight tooth and nail so that you never go to bed angry and like you have this impossible standard over your head, but you give yourself some grace and you know that taking some space and some time is good for processing, good for letting things calm down, good for looking at the situation in a different way and giving it some time to do that, giving some respect to maybe your partner's needs and the way that they process things, because it might be very different from you, like it is for me with my partner, right? And that can then help you to come together and have expectation around when you can talk about it and make sure you're both in a good place to do so. We often talk about this as like framing the conversation. And we teach that to our clients as well. All right. I'm going to go. I see a lot of read the label comments. Awesome. Beautiful. Let me know if you guys have any other questions about this and any other conventional tips that you've been told to work on your relationship. Okay. because I want to make sure that I'm able to address those as well. Now I'm going to go to our marriage myth buster. This one is good communication means never arguing. Who here believes that if you have good communication, then you just never argue? This is false. Good communication is much more about being able to navigate arguments in such a way that both partners will feel like their point is considered. Again, it's more about understanding and respect than about never having issues or never having arguments. That would be an impossible standard, and that expectation would only lead to unhappiness in your relationship and creating more of that negative story about the relationship, right? John Gottman talks about how one of the keys to a successful relationship, and he studied hundreds of thousands of couples and all the studies on divorce and everything, the most in-depth studies. And he says the most important element, key to a successful relationship, is to be able to repair and resolve conflict. Not that conflict is never going to happen, but it's to repair and resolve and know how to handle talking about those issues and work together as a team to solve them, right? So repair the damage, because damage is going to happen. It is, and how to resolve those issues. All right. Now we know that we're not the same person as our partner is. So there will inevitably be disagreements and possibly arguments. Again, this is unavoidable, right? The most important skill is being able to navigate these arguments along with skills needed to repair any of the damage done afterwards. Remember, we want to be able to repair and resolve. That is a foundation for a healthy long-term relationship. So let's make sure we don't fall into any of those traps of having these really high expectations, these unhealthy, unrealistic expectations of a relationship that will only make you feel unhappy if you continue to hold on to them. All right. So leave a comment right now if you would like a free guide showing you how to help your partner become willing to work on the marriage with you. This is something that Marc and I put together recently, and it is a powerful way to show you how to overcome some of that resistance that's so normal when your spouse is pulling away, showing you how to overcome your own biological tendencies to go into fear mode and how to avoid those mistakes that are very common and easy to make when you are in fear mode. The begging, the pleading, the demanding, acting out of desperation, freezing, doing nothing out of fear. We know all of those are only going to backfire. So empower yourself. If you want that free guide, just type willing spouse in the comments below, willing spouse, and we'll get you the guide on how to help your spouse become willing to work on the marriage with you. And next week, we're going to share with you how to stop divorce in its tracks and get your spouse to fall in love with you again. If you're excited for that next podcast episode, let me know. Thank you for joining me today, and I cannot wait to see your marriage thrive.
Thanks for listening to The Thriving Marriage, your A to Z blueprint for not just surviving marriage, but thriving. Until next time, my friends, thrive on.